Are we able to see them too, or no?
No. If you click the participant button, you'll see the list of participants on the side.
Okay.
Great. All right, we are just waiting another minute for other folks to show up and then we'll get started, so bear with us. All right. Out of respect for people's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me start by welcoming you to today's webinar. My name is Gunnar Hood. I provide marketing assistance to the great folks over at Diversified Equipment and Supply who have graciously sponsored this webinar. Today, we've got CNC solutionist Adrian Herndon here to help educate us on the differences between Sawjet and 5-axis CNC saws for stone fabrication. What I've learned by talking with Adrian over the last couple of weeks is that there are a number of differences, and there's opportunities for everybody who owns either of these pieces of equipment to optimize them to improve their productivity and profitability. So Adrian is going to share some insight with us about both of those. And if you happen to instead be in the market for one of these or the other, you should get some great takeaways in terms of what to think about before you put any money down for any of these items. So as we go through this, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat button down below or even the Q&A button, and we'll be happy to respond to your questions as we go through the webinar. With that, let me turn it over to Adrian Herndon, and I will share the slides here so that we can get started. Adrian, any initial comments you want to share with folks?
Well, just I'm glad you all could make it. Just the reason I wanted to do this is because I've been in numerous shops, and people are kind of undecided on what they want to purchase to make their productivity more cost effective, and they don't know the differences in the machines and what the cost of ownership is between the two. But that's pretty much why I was doing this today, just to really open people's eyes on what they're getting into when they buy these machines.
Well, great. Well, why don't we move to the agenda slide and we can talk about the things that you're going to cover today.
One of the main things would be the reason for purchasing the machine, be it lack of labor, tired of redoing stuff, and also like it says, the type of work to consider, which piece of equipment would work best for would work best for your needs. And then like, of course, the cost comparison. I like to tell people this is what you're looking at here, and this is what you're looking at here, and then the space requirements and the operational costs, which is a lot to do with the cost comparisons, and then the maintenance on both machines.
All right, so lots of topics to cover. We'll start with reasons why somebody might want to consider one of these machines or the other.
Well, a lot of times, like I said, I go into accounts and see people are just having a hard time finding labor. I don't know if any of you guys have that problem as well. I hear it a lot. And then the people that they do have, they end up losing them, and they end up pretty much saying this: if you don't give me this, I'm going to leave. So and in order, if you get more automated in your production, then that helps a lot. You'll still have to have employees, of course, but it does help. And then also the material yield, which is on this slide, is if you're cutting with a 5-axis CNC saw, or a Sawjet, you can get in the corners tighter. It actually had some of them have the move option to cut the pieces free and move them out of the way so you don't cut into the next one. And then of course the remakes, you have with a the CNC technology, you don't have so many people making you have people making templates, but you don't have to put the wood on the table or the plastic or whatever you're using. It's all digital, so there's not so many hands in the middle of the thing, in the middle of the drawings to mess things up. So you don't have as many remakes. You're still gonna have a few, but it'll cut it way down once you figure out what you're doing, and it helps a lot. And then the downtime of your equipment. I like to show people the differences in the which has a lot to do with the maintenance. You'll have your equipment downtime on doing maintenance, and you got to keep up with that, or you'll have a lot of downtime. And then people have outdated equipment, and they're wanting to move forward with their business and make that investment. Also, as they're growing, they want to get bigger, or they want to do different kinds of work, higher end stuff, or things like that. And sometimes the sawing is their bottleneck, and that's my last point, because you have to have the saw. Your bridge saw, be it a CNC saw or a Sawjet, is going to be the foundation to your shop. Without that, there's not going to be a whole lot of countertop production, because you've got to cut it before you can do anything else with it.
Adrian, before we move to the next slide, let me take you back to, the first bullet point, tired of manual labor. As a rule of thumb, is there kind of a factor, a productivity factor of increased productivity that you see when businesses shift from pure manual labor into using either of these two mechanized tools?
That's a good question, and yes, I see it all the time. I tell I tell stories to people of going in shops, and when they do get more automated, be it a Sawjet or a CNC saw, it just changed their life. They can't believe the difference, and they actually get a little ill at me because I didn't tie them down and make them do it, because it's that big of a life change.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let's go on to the next slide where we talk about some of the benefits. We'll start with the CNC saw.
There's a lot of benefits that comes along with the CNC saws. You got of course, your saw blade. It's going to be the same on a Sawjet and a CNC saw. The different types of materials that you can cut. Your miters are really clean and really tight when you're running on a 5-axis CNC saw. A lot of I'd say some of the Sawjets out there now, they're a lot better than they used to be. They've made a lot of improvements on those as well. And you can cut your porcelains, your marbles, your stone quartz, all of your natural stone. And the versatility of the 5-axis, you can do other things. You can do texturing, like leathering. You can do profiling, which a lot of people don't realize you can do profiling, and you can open your business up to doing more things. Say, some people do pool copings. You could put this limestone on a 5-axis CNC saw, and you can cut pool coping out with it. You can put the radiuses and all that stuff in it. Granted, it's slow, but a lot of people set it up and let it run overnight, and the blade cuts it out. And then of course, you reduce the waste and the labor. And by reducing the labor, you don't have a sawsmith standing there spinning tables and cutting this out and cutting that out. And I've been in shops before where people are standing on top of the table with a handsaw finishing cuts. They're on top of the table, they're spinning the table, they're cutting it, and it's just this way. The waste is a lot better as well, because you can, with a Sawjet and a 5-axis alike, you can do the cuts and the radiuses and get everything close together. With the move option on some of the 5-axis CNC saws, you can move the pieces out of the way so you don't cut into the next. And then you got the cost of ownership. At the bottom here, it says 3 cents an inch compared to $3 an inch with a water jet cutting. That's just on your radius cuts and sink cutouts.
So for those particular cutouts, that's 100 times difference, right?
It's a lot more money.
Yeah. I think so. That's interesting. What about layout too? I think you'd shared with me before, there's like laser layouts for patterns and stuff on the saws.
You can do all your drawings digitally, which makes it where you can actually have your template person out in the field. He could do it by never coming to the office. He could send it via email, and then they can clean up the drawings so you don't have somebody riding around with a bunch of stick templates in the back of a truck. You can do it in a small car or whatever because you're not hauling around a bunch of sticks that sometimes get wet and the glue lets go and they fall apart. And then with the laser, it's a lot more efficient.
Well, good. So you talked about versatility. Now we've got some images to really go with that. Tell us about these.
This was what I was talking about with the blade cutting the shapes. A lot of people don't do bigger stuff, but if you do, or if you have thought about doing it, you can do this with a 5-axis CNC saw, where a Sawjet does not have this capability to cut out these shapes. And like on they're big. The middle one's limestone, and then there's granite, and there's marble on the left, and then there's on the right side that is also limestone. But you can cut those shapes out. You have to finish it by hand because it's not going to polish it, but it is going to cut it out. And that's an extra, you have to pay extra for that program to do that, but you have that capability with the 5-axis CNC saw.
And how difficult would this be to do by hand, or is it even possible to do it by hand?
You can do it by hand, but one of the main problems with that is you do it dry by hand. Where a 5-axis CNC saw, you're doing it wet, so you're not throwing all the dust in the air. You're not throwing, stuff that causes silicosis. I mean, all that stuff is contained in a wet environment.
So it's safer and it's more accurate at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Right. All right. Well, let's go to the next slide. And this is about cost of ownership.
Well, these are a lot of topics I get asked about a lot. People say, yeah, that 5-axis saw is really cool, but I like the water jets because they cut out sinks and they cut out the radiuses and all that stuff, and they do it faster than a 5-axis. But when it comes to doing it with a 5-axis CNC saw, it's a lot less money because, like I said before, the blade's the blade. Both of them are going to run blades. But then you got the water jet aspect that's a lot more expensive with the garnet and the lines and the table and all the other stuff that goes along with it. But it is faster. But it really just depends on what you're wanting to do and what your shop does. If you're into high production stuff, a Sawjet is a great choice because it cuts fast. Or fast, I wouldn't say super fast, but it cuts faster than a CNC saw when it comes to radiuses.
Okay.
And here's an example here on this slide of this is what it would look like if a 5-axis was cutting out a sink. This one I took a picture of this one actually cutting out the sink bowl, and there's the cost comparisons in you doing it this way. And I got that number from a friend of mine that sells tooling, and he sells bits this one he sold, and it's going to be different, just like I said at the bottom there, depending on what you're cutting and how fast you're running, because different bits wear out faster than others. But on this comparison he did, this was just with a quartz material, quartz and granite, not quartzite, but it was it will also cut the quartzite, but it was $60 a bit, and it would do 200 sinks, and that's 33 cents a sink. When in comparison, you got a Sawjet running $3 an inch, so you have to do the math on that one. I mean, that sink right there could cost you $40. That's just the water jet portion.
Right. For those who aren't familiar with an incremental bit, can you describe a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, the incremental bits come in and cut little by little. They'll cut, say, a 1/16 of an inch, and then they'll drop and they'll go around and they'll drop a 1/16 of an inch. You can speed up the travel speed on it to make it cut faster in circles, but you can't take out as much or faster in radiuses or anything. But one of the good things I didn't mention is with those incremental bits, if you don't have a CNC router and if you're doing everything else manually, when you get that sink cutout, you can start with a 100 grit polish pad because it's smooth. Whereas a water jet, it's a lot more rigid. So a lot of times they have to take a cup wheel, they have to take grinding stones just to get it smooth enough to start polishing it.
So the cut product with a Sawjet is rougher than when you use an incremental bit. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And also with the water jet, the faster you cut, the rougher it gets.
Okay. So speed versus quality is one of the trade-offs.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So some other factors that people need to think about when, especially if they're going from manual to automation, is how much space and how much power they need. So tell us about that.
Well, the floor space with 5 axis, you just have the saw, standalone saw. So when you go adding, when you go getting a water jet, you have the saw, which is almost the same size as just the 5 axis, but then you have the water jet portion of it, and that takes a intensifier pump. Intensifier pumps are much larger, are almost, I'd say, half the size of the saw because you have to have that pump on the side. And then you also have to look at the power requirements. I go into a lot of shops that are starving for power. That's two main things I see is water and power. But if you're with the 5 axis CNC saw, you can run it with a lot less power. But then when you go Sawjet, that intensifier pump pulls a lot of power. So you got both of them.
You'll recognize that some of the people watching may not be familiar with the term intensifier pump. Can you say a little bit more about what that is, what it does?
Yeah, the pump gets the water up to a very high pressure so it will cut through the granite. And at that time, it also adds garnet through a line that mixes with the water, and that's what cuts is the garnet and the water. And by
Okay.
doing that, that's what the power requirements are really high in that pump to get it up to pressure. They've came a long ways from since when they first came out. They've done a lot to the pumps to make them better, but it still requires a lot more power than just a regular CNC saw.
Right. And so as the garnet makes its way through the intensifier pump, are there impellers or things like that that ultimately get worn down because of the garnet?
Well,
Inter
actually, it's not added at the pump. The garnet's added at the tip. So it has
Ah,
a hopper and it pulls it through a line, which then introduces it into the water right before it hits the tip. So,
okay.
but that garnet does cut the tip because it's a lot of water and a lot of pressure. So that leads to the maintenance as well. But we'll talk about that more here in a little bit.
Okay. Anything else people should know about floor space or power requirements?
That's about all I have for now.
Okay. So I know you're going to talk about operational costs here, but there's an initial outlay of money too for buying either of these machines. And tell us what you've seen here.
Well, with the 5 axis CNC saw, you have you're looking at a range from 170 to 220, and that would by around 190 you would get the move option of that. It would do your sink cutouts, and with 190 you actually have a extra spindle that makes the sink cutouts faster than just using the spindle on machine. Where the Sawjet, that higher number on the Sawjet is not quite high enough because a lot of people like to do double bed Sawjets so they can run one bed and then unload the other one while that one's running and keep it running all the time. So, it could get up to 370 on the double bed.
And that would be for somebody that's more of a high production shop, probably.
Yeah, that's normally the people that get the double bedded ones are the really high production guys.
Okay. And then when we take a look at the row for operating costs, you've talked about this before, but I think that kind of spells it out. Like, you go to a $1 sign restaurant or a $5 sign restaurant.
Yeah, it's it's a it's quite a large difference in the machine costs, and then the operating costs are a very large difference as well because of the what you have to keep it going.
So when you see uh, business owners decide to buy a Sawjet, what are some of the reasons why they feel it's worth the higher investment or the higher operational cost?
That's a good question. Mainly because of the speed in which the water jet cuts and because of the inside miters that a water jet will do, but a 5-axis CNC saw will not. On a lot of porcelain materials that are coming up, there people are doing everything's mitered, and you do have inside miters on the porcelain materials on some jobs, and you have to have a water jet to do that. You can do it with a standalone water jet, or you can do it with a saw jet, but you have to have that jet, that 5-axis water jet, to cut those inside miters, or you'll have to go in by hand, and that's really tough. But I don't know how much of that stuff people are doing now.
Yeah. So it goes back to what you said really at the beginning of the presentation is understanding what type of work you're going to do really influences which machine is best for your purpose.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to actual operational costs then.
Well, you got the 5-axis, CNC saw. You got just your blades, which you have the same thing with the saw jet. The blade's a blade, and then you have the incremental bits to do your cutouts of your sinks and your radius cuts and things like that. But then when you get into the water jet portion of a saw jet, I mean, you're looking at $25 to $30 an hour to run. That's with the consumption of electricity, garnet, and you factor in also some issues like lines, tips, things of that nature. Downtime where you have to change seals. You do have to change the seals in the pumps, and you need to know how to work on them because it's pretty expensive to get the guys that you bought the machine from to come in. And then you got the sacrificial surfaces that you have to cut on top of, say, be it foam, hardy backer, or the rubber slats that you have to change out because that water jet's going to cut through everything. And then, of
That'll,
course, the tank clean out. Almost forgot about that one. That's a good one. Every shop I've ever went into that has a saw jet, they despise doing that job because you have to take all the slats off, and you have to either get you a machine to do it with, like a front end loader with a bucket on the back, or you get in there with a shovel and you start shoveling it all out. And they're pretty big boxes, and they get slapped full of all that muck and mud. And if you let it sit there too long, it turns almost like concrete.
how often does that have to be cleaned out?
Really depends on how much you're cutting. I mean, because that's what it is. It's just pieces of granite, or be it pieces of quartz, any kind of material you're cutting, or tile, anything. But I mean, it's normally I see people clean out. A busy shop is going to clean it out, I'd say once a month.
And how much time does it take them to do that process?
Usually they're coming on Saturday,
Yeah.
and the ones that clean it out, the ones I've seen are the ones that have the double bed. So you have two of them to clean out that day. It's a good, if you let it get in there enough and packed in there tight enough, it's an 8-hour job to clean both of them out by hand. But now if you have like the excavator where you can get the with a bucket and pull it out, it's not so bad, but you still have to do that. You can't, and if you hit the side of that box and tear it up, then you're in a mess.
Got it. All right. Well, we've got some things you wanted to share about the type of work or what comprises a typical 5-axis CNC saw.
Well, on these two pictures on the left, I probably should have put that one on the bottom on the top because I'm talking about the step cutting bits for sinks and radius cuts. There's a couple of you see there's a sink there, and there's radius cuts on the corner right there on the left side. But then this is just on the bottom picture. But then the blades used for the strips where the backsplash is there, and then you got the miter top down, the drop down miters right there in the skirt on that island on that picture up top there. That 5-axis CNC saw does a great job on miter cuts. because it's just the way it's a big beefy saw with a beam on it, and it's very rigid, and it makes a lot of difference on the bed that your material's sitting on. Because if your bed's not right, then it's not going to do a good miter cut. I mean, you can have the same problem with a CNC saw because people cut up the tables real bad and they don't make sure they're planed off nice and good and flat, and they cut into them and they keep going and going. Well, that's going to be the same effect, but you're not cutting on top of slats. So if you have to make sure that base on the bottom where that Sawjet is good to cut on that as well. But the miters are most of the time I've seen cleaner miters on a CNC saw than I have on a Sawjet.
Okay. And in your top picture, you're showing a, really incredible island. And so the miter cut really comes in handy for that waterfall effect, I think is what they describe on the island.
Yeah, right there on the end pieces there.
Okay. Very nice. All right. And then when we compare that to the Sawjet configuration.
Yeah, the Sawjet configuration, you have there's your blade on the left side there of the bridge. That table there with the slats on it, that is where the pieces lay in, the water shoots into that table, and that stops it from cutting any further because it hits the water, so it stops it. That's what fills up with mud and muck and all that, and they have to pull those slats out and dig it out. This is a compressed picture, so it's much larger than it looks here. So, but the blades use just like on the CNC saw where you cut them, but it's that water jet that costs so much more money than the way the CNC saw does it. But it does it at more speed than the 5-axis CNC saw.
Okay.
But not as clean.
Awesome.
And then right here's another picture. It's just a CNC saw where just things that's what we're talking about today, just things you should know before purchasing them. Like this is one doing the water jet cuts where the whole machine goes down. And it cuts that portion right there too.
Okay.
And there's another one about this is the newer Sawjets I've seen out there. And this does this is the ability to cut the inside miters on this one. And that's the nozzle right there pointing at the angle. And that's going to do this coming down to do that inside miter on that piece right there. And and like I said, the speeds are really nice because it is faster than the step cutting bits that they use on the 5-axis CNC saw. And then the ability on the porcelain material is pretty fragile, and if you don't have the correct blade on the water jet or on the 5-axis CNC saw, it will chip it out really bad. So a lot of people like to cut the porcelain with the water jets, and it's thin, so if it doesn't cut real perfect, then it's not that big a deal. Even though you do miter it, you have to go slow, so you would get a good cut on the mitered ends.
Okay, excellent.
And this is a little bit about the maintenance that I've been talking about, is just the things you have to do on both machines. I mean, you have to keep them calibrated. You have to do that as well on the Sawjet. But I put 5-axis saw. Probably should have put that on the Sawjet as well. But and of course, oil and grease. Another thing you have to do on the 5-axis saw, you do have to make sure those tables stay correct. But then when you get into the Sawjets, you're talking about the seals and the pump, the tips. If you don't change the tips, they fan out with you, and it's not a nice, clean, sharp tip. And your water jet lines, they're going to go out. I mean, it's a lot of pressure running through those lines. So you have to keep this stuff in stock, because you can't, if you go down, you're down. Because if the jet goes down, the saw's down as well. And then you have to keep it calibrated as well, because a lot of times when you're cutting with a Sawjet, you want it where the blade and the Sawjet meet in the radiuses. Then it'll leave a lump there, because you can take that lump down, but you don't want to let it cut too far in where it's a dip, because you want to leave a little knot on there. If you don't keep it calibrated, you won't have a knot. You'll have a dip, and then you'll have to fan all that out, and you take too much material off, and that looks pretty bad. And then the tank clean out. That's what we were talking about a little while ago, is a job in itself. And then you have to keep the hardy backer on top of the tank, be it hardy backer, any kind of anything, the foam, anything to lay on top of that, because you can't just lay the piece on top of the metal. You're supposed to cut it on top of that. And when the water jet goes through, it's going to go through it all the time.
Right. But the backer board really minimizes vibration as it's cutting and keeps
And
it
then
from.
the backer board helps for when you cut it with the blade, because you
Yeah.
don't want to run that blade into those metal slats.
Oh, definitely not.
That's is if you don't have that backer board on there and you use that blade, it could get ugly real fast.
Got it.
And then here's a picture of, I don't know if you guys all on here have seen water jets before. Some people haven't. I remember the first time I saw them, I thought, "Hey, it's pretty cool. They're cool machines. They work really well, and they'll cut any material you put in front of them." But the intensifier pumps, on the far left, it's a big unit, and that's what gets your water up to pressure to run it through. The next picture over is that tip. That's the water coming out of that tip, and that's the right there with the. That's what you have to keep. You have to keep it in calibration. You have to change the tips out. The tip gets too wide, it fans. So that's why I put that note on there. And then the next one over is just what it looks like inside of that intensifier pump. Because that's the pump itself. The box is just the box. It encases it, but there's the pump, and it's hydraulic, so it has seals in it, and it's a pretty big unit. It's heavy and it takes a lot of power. And if you don't change the seals out, it won't run. It just won't create enough water to do what it's supposed to do.
And what is a typical amount of water pressure coming out of the nozzle on one of these?
I was told, but I forgot. It's 30,000, 60,000. It's way up there. It's a lot.
What about safety considerations for operators with something like that? I mean, it seems like something like that could easily cut a hand off really quick.
Yeah, it will do some damage to you. I mean, people have been hit cleaning up tanks before. Somebody didn't lock a machine out, and the thing picked up and blew a hole through them. Didn't kill them. They got lucky, but it'll cut through anything. And a lot of people, if they run them and they get in front of the tank or something, it'll keep running. And I mean, they got safety stuff on them, which is good. So I mean, that the same thing could happen with a CNC saw. I mean, he can run over you and all that stuff. But a water jet is kind of there's not putting anything back together once it's going to cut you in half. And it'll cut your finger good or cut your anything.
Yeah. So safety things that you've got, if they're doing maintenance work on it, the clean out of the tank and so forth, then there's probably defined processes like, turning off the power, lockout, tag out, things of that sort to help ensure safety.
Yeah, definitely kill all the power, lock it out, lock out the power, so nobody can come over there and say, "Oh, we need to move this out of the way to grab this." No, you need to lock it out, and make sure nobody can ever get close to turn the thing on if somebody's working on it.
Well, I know that wraps up all of the slides that you had. We had a couple questions come in beforehand, and one of those had to do with, somebody thinking about upgrading from manual processes to automation, but the price tag of new equipment seems kind of high to them. Should they even consider looking at used equipment for either type of equipment we've talked about?
Sometimes that is a good option to do that, but we found more times than I mean, anytime we've found a lot of times that people, when they have looking at used equipment, first of all, you got to make sure it works. And if anybody's been in this business anytime, the stone business is rough. It's hard, it's heavy, and it's wet. And water's not nobody's friend. And with all the dirtiness, and I mean, you don't really know how. I mean, a car you don't know how anybody takes care of either. But this stuff is going to make you money. But that's not even to consider. If you buy a used piece of equipment, you're going to have to pay somebody to move it. Then you're going to have to pay somebody to have it come set it up. And then once they set it up, they got to train you how to run it. So you're going to be so close to what a new piece of equipment costs and with no warranty, then I mean, it's just a big gamble. Because we actually sell used equipment, and but I don't like selling used equipment to someone not unless I'm really sure about it, because I don't want to see anybody feel like I've done them wrong and them go out of business because they bought something that broke down.
Now that makes perfect sense. That was the main question that we had that came in. In closing thoughts, are there, any final suggestions you would make to folks that are thinking about either moving up into automation or upgrading their existing equipment? And if they want to get in touch with you, we've got your contact info here on the screen as well. Let me check the Q&A. I see another question coming in. All right. Actually, we have two more questions. First one is, what is the production difference if we're cutting the straight portion of the sink with the blade and just finishing the corners with the finger bit?
As far as time wise,
Yeah, why don't we deal with that, both time and cost potentially?
the time wise with a Sawjet is going to be faster. The Sawjet is going to cut those radiuses faster. The blades are going to run are about the same speed because the blade's the blade. They're both going to go pretty fast. Um, but the overall radius cuts that you're getting off a step cutting bit will be cleaner in the end. So like I said earlier, if you're in a manual shop and you're not having to clean up those cuts, because time is time. You're going to either take time on the saw or you're going to take time on the table getting it cleaned up. So, and I'd say it's going to take, well, with the secondary bit, I'd say it'd take twice as long on the radius cuts. Because if you have the way they've done the 5-axis saw jets, I mean the 5-axis CNC saws now, they've made them faster because they have a secondary spindle which will spin at 15,000 RPMs, so therefore it'll cut faster. And that's what they're trying to do. They want to catch up with the speed of the saw jet, but not with what it costs to run the saw jet and to get a cleaner cut at the end.
Yeah. And the second question, you might understand what this means, is what does it mean that the cost is the same on both machines? That came in kind of early in the presentation, probably when we were talking about operational costs, I guess, or maybe just initial costs.
No, the cost of the blade portion of it.
Okay.
And the blade portion of it, saying the saw blade portion, because your saw blade is going to last. If you took the water jet off the saw jet and just used the saw, you took the 5-axis saw and use the saw like you do, then that cost of ownership on that portion is almost the same. It's just the water jet portion that pushes the cost up.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's what I meant by that. I didn't do a very good job of explaining that.
No, we encourage questions for clarification, so that's great. Well, we certainly appreciate your taking the time to share this insight with us today, Adrian, and we know that this recording will be made available to those who couldn't attend today. And again, want to thank Diversified Equipment for sponsoring this. Some people might say, do you sell both types of equipment, or can you answer questions about both types of equipment? And so we'll just kind of close with your answer on that.
I do sell the CNC, the 5-axis CNC saws. I do not sell the saw jets, but I would never knock a saw jet because I have lots of friends that do sell saw jets, and I think they're awesome machines as well. But like I said in the beginning, it's all about what you're trying to do and what your business model looks like.
Great. So if somebody needs a referral to one of your friends for a saw jet, you can help make that possible.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Great.
If somebody's looking for a saw jet, I'll tell you what I got. And I'll have to really have a conversation with you because some people think they need something. And and if they do think it and they say, yeah, will be a good fit for me. If I've seen something different, then I will let you know. But I'd never say you don't know what you're talking about, but I would say this might be a better fit for what you're trying to do.
Right. Well, one thing that we've heard from many clients of Diversified is that you guys are very consultative in your sales process. You do not hard press people on anything just because you sell it. If it's not right for somebody, you're going to tell them that. And that's one of the things that we hear they appreciate about you, in addition to the fact that you look beyond the machine, you look at how you can help that operation really accelerate their success. And that's, it's more than a machine. It's about operational efficiency. It's a number of other factors. So there's a lot more that Diversified brings to the table that, than just a piece of equipment. So your clients are really great at giving us that feedback.
And I appreciate that from all of them because
Yeah.
we try our best to. We our goal at Diversified is to make you more profitable, and that's what we would like to do. Because the people that are more profitable will be return customers because they'll say those guys are Diversified. They know what they're talking about, and they're not just trying to throw something in my shop that's not going to make me a ton of money.
Well, for anybody who has questions, you can go to the website, cnc.works, or you can contact Adrian directly at his email or his phone number here on the screen. And again, we appreciate your time and attention and hope this was helpful for you. And if you've got suggestions or thoughts about what else you'd like to hear about from Diversified, drop us a line and let us know. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks.